to inspire external attacks. One thing we're doing, though, on the ground, we're not just taking back territory. As we take back important territory, we're collecting substantial amounts of information about the foreign fighter network, about how it's put together, who leads it, and that helps us really root it out, not only in Iraq and Syria, but in the branches and little networks that exist in France and other places.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Senator Johnson.
Mr. McGirt, thanks for coming here. The analogy I've been using is that of a beehive. If you have one in your backyard, you can go out there and poke it with a stick and do damage to it, but you stir up the bees and they actually become more dangerous. You've obviously been reporting on a fair amount of progress. We've been making some gains. We're getting information. We're taking back territory. And yet CIA Director did testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee and said that our efforts have not reduced their terrorism capability and global reach, and they remain a formidable, resilient, and largely cohesive enemy. Do you disagree with that assessment?
I agree with the director, of course, that this is something, and I think you see in my testimony, I am the last one working on this most complex issue every single day to diminish this significant threat. Let me just put a number on it. 40,000 foreign fighters have traveled into Iraq and Syria for the last 4 or 5 years, indoctrinated with this jihadi ideology. That's almost twice as many from the numbers we've seen that went to Afghanistan in the 80s, and we know where that eventually led to. So this is something we haven't seen before, and you add to it social media and the speed of international travel, everything now. It is an unprecedented challenge, and is going to be with us for years.
So again, do you agree with CIA Director Brendan's assessment that we have not reduced their capability? They remain a largely formidable, resilient, and cohesive enemy?
It is, well, it's not the entity certainly that it was 18 months ago. And the attacks like Brussels and Paris are attacks that they plan from their safe havens and sanctuary. So those attacks, we believe, were organized in Raqqa, planned. Those sophisticated types of attacks, it's harder for them to do when you're pressuring them and pressuring their territory. The lone wolf attacks are the types of things that are very difficult to stop.
But my point being is, until we actually defeat them, I mean, again, we can nibble around the edges, we can make some progress, we can push them out of Iraq, but they remain in Syria. I mean, I have yet to hear out of this administration a game plan for actually defeating them. I mean, I hear the game plan for making progress, but actually defeating them, and that's the point I'm trying to make, is if we don't defeat them, if we don't deny them the territory, if we don't deny them that caliphate, if we don't take away those safe havens, they're incredibly sophisticated. They're inspiring the lone wolf type of activity we've seen in San Bernardino, now in Orlando, tragically. There was, by the way, a foiled plot against the Masonic Temple in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, also probably ISIS-inspired. So we have to defeat them. Where's the game plan for that?
No, Senator, our strategy is defeat, and it's a three-year campaign plan to degrade and defeat. And to defeat, you do have to take away their territory. So in Iraq, it's been city by city. In Mosul, if I can go through in some detail, but in the Mosul, we've been focused on isolating their key population nodes, cutting off their connections between Raqqa and Mosul. The operation in Manbij is about isolating Raqqa, and after Manbij, we will move on Raqqa. So that's
when did the three-year clock start? Because President Obama declared our goal of degrading and ultimately defeating ISIS 22 months ago. We're almost 2 years into it. Or when the clock start ticking on our three-year plan?
We put the campaign together in September of 2014. And it took time to generate the local forces to be able to take on what at the time was the most formidable military force on the ground.
Do you think then that we will have ISIS defeated, in other words, deny them the territory, deny them the safe havens, even in Syria, within another, basically you're saying about 14 months then, if it's a three-year game plan?
I wanted to go a lot faster than that. One of the reasons I was in Iraq last week was to focus on the Mosul campaign. And we won't put a timeline on the Mosul campaign, but we'd like to do it as soon as possible. One reason we're moving on Manbij right now is to set the conditions in place to move on Raqqa. And the force that has to move on Raqqa has to be a predominantly Arab force. That's why we've increased our special forces inside Syria to train and equip that force. And after Manbij, the plan is Raqqa. So we are moving at a tempo that I believe will lead to the ultimate defeat.
Within 14 months, if it's a three-year game plan? I mean, we're not going to defeat them within 14 months, are we?
Well, I wanted to go a lot faster than that.
That's my point. We're not doing this fast enough, are we? We're poking the hive with a stick. It becomes more dangerous. We haven't reduced their terrorism capability or their global reach. When are we going to have a game plan from this administration to actually accomplish the goal, defeating them? It's not going to happen in the 3-year time frame. Is it going to take, what's it going to take?
Well, I understand your question, Senator. Let me just kind of we want to speed up their defeat in Mosul. So one thing we're doing, now this is on the military side. I mentioned it's not just the military, but we're using Apache helicopters. We're using forward advisors to begin this operation towards Mosul. There's an operation going right now south of Mosul that is critical to isolating ISIL inside Mosul. The Manbij operation that's ongoing right now, it's hard fighting. Once that is done, that sets the conditions for Raqqa. So it is a step-by-step process to get to Raqqa and Mosul. We're beginning to totally isolate their presence in Raqqa and Mosul, and I believe we're setting the conditions in place to get them out of both of those cities.
Listen, I appreciate your efforts, but I agree with you. We are not moving anywhere close to fast enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kane.
Thank you.